Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, wherever you are. My name is Craig Murrin. I'm joined here by Simon Putt and Chris Williams, and you are listening to Thinking Financial. Today, we are talking about expat living. So we're going to cover a few sections of the cost of living overseas, dealing with your finances in different countries, and how to retire as an expat. Welcome, everybody. My name is Craig Murrin. This is Christopher Williams and Simon Putt, and together we are GWM USA West Coast, and this is Thinking Financial. Good morning, guys.
Good morning. How are we?
Good, thank you.
Very good, very good. Thanks for joining. So this week we're going to talk about expat living. We're all expats. We all actually have quite a connection because our first postings as expats was the Middle East, the UAE. How did you guys find that journey? What was your feelings that first day when you got off the plane in DXB Airport for that new journey ahead of yourself? How did you feel?
For me, I have to be honest, it was quite seamless because I was already traveling out to specifically Dubai for quite a long time before actually locating there. My locating there was just a natural progression from visiting the place and spending a lot of time in the place in the preceding years. And literally, I got off the plane with my luggage, just dumped that in the hotel, showered and changed, and went straight into the office to carry on working. So, yeah, that was the easy part. Just carried on, just had a different office and a different place. And we happened to be working in the same time zone as my clients. So from that point of view, it was very straightforward. The trickier part of it was then bringing my family over and getting them integrated. And that's when you start sort of having hurdles to clear and challenges to deal with. And yeah, that's where it became a little bit more complicated. But, you know, one gets through it and one deals with it. And from thereafter, it was a terrific experience.
Oh, good stuff. And what about you, Chris? How was day one in Dubai for you?
I loved it. I was actually in Abu Dhabi.
Okay.
So just down the road, but basically the same thing. I absolutely loved it. Many reasons. I love being surrounded by different cultures. And this is so true. When I went to the office for the first day and you meet people from all over the world, everyone's different, but everyone's still quite the same.
Yeah. And
that also translates over to dealing with clients. One of my first clients was from South Africa, and then someone from Europe, and someone from the UK, and from America and Canada. And it's so stimulating to be surrounded by so much new information, so much stimuli. I truly think it was one of the best experiences of my life, and I'm so glad I did it.
No,
that was my greatest. Sorry, that was my greatest takeaway as well. Just the explosion of cultural diversity that suddenly you have around you. I mean, I'm from London originally, which I've always considered to be massively cosmopolitan and diverse city. Yeah. Then you go to Dubai, and suddenly the ante is upped quite a lot in terms of exposure to so many people from so many different cultures. The story I always like to tell people is that, you know, I joined a book club when I was in Dubai. Reading is one of my passions.
This is the story you like to tell people?
It's a story.
It's a very exciting story about the book club.
Well, what I like about it is that, for example, if there were 12 people sitting around the table talking about the book, invariably it was 12 people from different nationalities. Yeah. I was the British guy. You'd have an Indian, a Serb, an Arab from one part of the region or other. And everyone just brought completely different perspectives to the same novel. And so, you know, obviously you get that experience about that particular reading, but then just generally chatting to all these people, you just become opened up to so many different things around the world.
I love
it's amazing how you become a champion for your own culture as well. So I've never felt particularly British. I've never really identified. I just was born and lived in England. But suddenly when you're overseas and people ask you questions about England, you suddenly get this new pride about your culture. And it becomes a greater part of your identity when you're living overseas.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the fact of just being opened up to the different cultures and the different religions and just how everybody got on. You know, it was a very, very happy place. Everybody, there was no arguing. Everybody just treated everybody exactly the same. And that's what I really took away from that. And that's what I do now. Well, I did before, but this is very much how I live my life here in the US, is that everybody's the same. I don't see different religions, different colors, different creeds or anything like that. And I love Dubai for that.
There was a sense there, wasn't there, of mutual respect. I always found like you kind of gave it to everyone. Everyone sort of gave it back. Everyone did get it. Maybe because the sun shone every day.
Yeah, maybe.
There's just a reason to be optimistic. Or maybe because there was an air about the place that made everyone feel kind of driven and energized. It's just an easy place to be happy. And I definitely think that resonated in relationships with other people.
Certainly, from a media perspective, they are very curbed and limited to what they could report. So there wasn't a lot of bad things reported in the media, hence why everybody just seemed to just tick along. And when you lived in the Middle East, you were in your bubble. You're in the Middle East bubble and everything was wonderful. Everything was great. Things happened outside, but it was always, that's the way I kind of looked at it. But my first experience of literally getting off the plane on September 17th, 2009, I got picked up from the airport by my buddy that lived there. My suitcase was still in the back of the car. We went straight to the Madinat and went out drinking with his work colleagues. I didn't even get time to freshen up, shower or anything. It was an evening, 6-7 o'clock, Thursday night. And that was my introduction into Dubai. And it never stopped moving. Basically, I love my time there. I love being an expat. I think it's one of the best parts of the job, being able to help people and live overseas and enjoy a different lifestyle, a different culture, and bring the good things from my experiences in the UK and other countries and bring them into my life. I think it just makes me a better person.
Hugely, you become a lot more in tune with cultural differences. So quick mark, before living in Abu Dhabi, I lived in Japan, and lived in a small little town in rural Japan, and no one really spoke English. And in my early 20s, that was a new experience for me.
Wow.
And you learn a lot from tonality. You learn a lot from body language. You learn a lot about how to communicate subconsciously in a different way when you physically can't use your words.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love that. And I think becoming more in tune with cultural differences, becoming more in tune with these kind of things, make us in our jobs so much better at the communication side.
Yeah. Well, that actually is great, because let's move it into talking about finances, overseas, cost of living, things like that. So with our experiences of being expats, as you just said, Chris, it does open us up to a little bit more education because we've lived in different places, so we can kind of help. What was the biggest... Well, what was the cost of living in Japan, first of all? What was the cost of living for you guys in the Middle East or any other countries that you've lived in, compared to the UK or here, for example?
UK is relatively expensive, actually. Japan was probably as expensive as the UK. Obviously, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, probably relatively the same expense, but obviously we didn't have income tax. So from a cost of living point of view. But
from a cost, I get that. Certainly from London, I would say Dubai was a comparable, but where I'm from in the UK, Bristol, it's not overly expensive. I think my mortgage when I left 12 years ago was about £500 a month for a £120,000 house. Beer was cheap, cider was cheap, going out to eat wasn't overly expensive comparatively to say London and Bristol are very different. So that's from where I'm from. Obviously, you guys are a little bit closer to London, so your prices of living in the UK were probably higher.
Yeah, I think in that said, though, something did change in Dubai over the years. I mean, I arrived there in 2004, and so I was there for 16 years in total.
Yeah.
During those early years, it was a very cheap place to live. And then it did change a lot over the years, particularly the last 5 or 6 years I was there. There was definitely an escalation in price. So even comparing it with London, and I'm a Londoner, I was actually struck one time I came back to London and did sort of comparative shopping in the supermarket, how cheap London was compared with Dubai.
Wow.
And so, it's certainly something that then you become much more aware of in terms of your financial planning, that actually, you know what, I have to budget in a way that I never had to before. And even you start making decisions about, well, am I really going to go out and buy my usual sort of pack of raspberries for that price compared with the price that I would pay for that in the UK? So cost of living definitely did come into play during my latter years in Dubai.
What was your rent in 2004 compared to what your rent was when you just left? Because that's one of the biggest things that went up, and recently it's just gone down there due to COVID and a few other things. But it was, when I was there in 2017, it was massive.
Yeah, well, the rent sort of was pretty low when I arrived, and then it escalated and went up over the years, but then spent the last 4 or 5 years coming back down and continuing to head down. So it's been quite a volatile sort of indicator of cost of living over the last few years. So yeah, I can remember its peak very well. The rent I was paying for a villa at that time with my family, it's a 4-bedroom villa, was high.
Yeah. No,
it was expensive.
I can imagine.
What year was the peak, just out of curiosity?
I would put it at around 2012. I'm going to go with that, and maybe sort of close to that time.
Yeah, I mean,
I moved out there in 2014, and the oil price was considerably high at that point. But when the oil price crashed, I think a few years later, that's when we saw, and the prices dropped, didn't we?
Yeah, that definitely had a factor, and I think one of the biggest reasons why the fluctuating rents, you had to pay 12 months in advance most of the time, which was a hell of a lot of money for some of these places. So I think that's what certainly people would try and negotiate and try and get it dropped down, because it was an annual payment, and there was so much fluctuation on with the rents due to that. I think
it's all changing now. You've got different dynamics there in terms of driving the real estate prices, and it's been becoming increasingly a tenant's market rather than the landlord's market. It's certainly getting much cheaper to rent there.
That's what I've heard. So what was the reason that you guys decided to become an expat? What pushed you into not necessarily getting into the industry, but getting into the working abroad? What was the reason you decided to go, that's it, UK, I'm done, let's go and live overseas?
For me, it was two things. One was purely pragmatic. It was where my career took me. I was covering the Middle Eastern clients out of London and flying out regularly, and it just became a logical thing to move over and put my desk on the ground in the region. And it was a very good career move. My career in that time in investment banking, it took off. I was able to do a lot more business, have a lot more profile in the region, and it was the making of me to move over there. So from that angle, it was the career move. But the other angle, which was much more personal, was that I always wanted to live and work abroad. I originally went into a career that would have international flavor about it, so that I could have exposure to people and places around the world. And I always wanted that experience to live and work abroad. I didn't expect it to be for so long. I initially went over to Dubai for 3 years. There was an offer to extend for another 2 years, but like I say, 3 years became 5 years, became 16 years. Yeah. And that journey continues now that the United States is my place of work.
Exactly.
So
how often do you sit with clients that say that same story? Oh, I only came over for a year or 2 years, and then 20 years later they're still in the foreign country. They're still out of the UK. I think it's certainly, once you get into the local culture, whichever country you're living in, you start to enjoy it. It starts to feel like home. You build up your friends, you build up your network, and then it's like, well, what do I have back in the UK? You might have family there, but my life is overseas now.
Mainly just somewhere where it didn't get dark at 4 o'clock in the evening. Joking. I just always traveled quite a lot as a kid. I've always been quite lucky to have been exposed to other cultures. So the idea of just going to live abroad was just an extension of, of that career move, really. I didn't really put a lot of thought into it's some ginormous move to go overseas. It always just seemed like a fairly natural thing to do.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine a time now where I hadn't have done it.
No, the same here. I can't imagine it. If I hadn't have done it, where would I be now? I have no idea. Would I be happy? Who knows? I honestly, I assume I would be, but who knows? So what would you say is the one biggest takeaway from a financial standpoint that you did or would do differently as an expat living overseas, or with overseas financial planning, that you recommendation or advice you would give out to another person if they were asking you, I'm going to go and move to such and such country? Time
is what I would say. So we spoke a few weeks ago about the time value of money. I know I say this quite a lot
every
in this
week
podcast, and you know what? I'm going to keep saying it, and because it's so important. And obviously, I know we said things we wish we knew when we were younger. It's when you're overseas, I'm talking about the UAE for a minute, earning
Yeah.
a tax-free income, putting a little bit of that away now, and then just letting it grow. And if you tax optimize it or whatever, compounding year on year, you can have a considerable amount of money a little bit later on. But why worry about that when you're in Dubai and it's like a holiday and the sun shines every day? We can go jet skiing. We can have this amazing life that we assume will last forever. And typically, when you become an expat, your life kind of becomes, I wouldn't say better, becomes more interesting. There's a lot more opportunities available to you, and that tends to cost money. It's only at the end of it you look back and you think, what have I actually got to show for my time here? That's what I say to a lot of people. I know a lot of people that left and they were like, yeah, actually, haven't really got any money from this. I've got some amazing memories, but I haven't actually put anything away. And you're like, but you're in such a great position to, because you had disposable income. You know, you didn't have liabilities at that point either. Why didn't you take advantage of that?
Yeah, I think that would certainly, depending on why the person was going to whatever country they were going to, I would ask them at the beginning, what's the reason they're going there? Are you going there to earn more money and save more money? Then great, make sure to have a plan. But if you're just going there for the jollies and the experience, certainly have a plan. But I'd have to try and figure out what, because I know exactly what you're saying, Chris. I know so many people that left there.
I wouldn't call it procrastination, but you kind of feel like you're on holiday. But if you move out there when you're 25 and you leave when you're 35, no, that's 10 years of your life gone. You haven't been contributing to a pension back home. It's 10 years you haven't been putting money aside. You're still going to have to, at some point, have financial independence from your work. And you've sort of lost 10 years when you could have been putting that money aside because you had an I'm on holiday mentality. That's just not for expats. That can be for anyone. We're all guilty of that. And that's just not an accusation. We're all guilty of it. But you've lost a considerable amount of time and you should have had more to show for it, perhaps. And
especially is when you are working in, say, the UK or even here in the US, when you're working for a company, most of the time they're going to be paying into the government pension for you. So when you're in the UK, you get your UK state pension. Here, you automatically pay into your social security so that later in life you can rely on that. You don't have that in a lot of countries. And I think people don't realize that when they do go over and they, oh yeah, don't worry about it. I don't have to worry about it until I'm a set age. Well, that's fine. You don't maybe have to worry about it until a set age if you're in a country that are providing for you when you get to that age. But a lot of countries as an expat, you don't get entitled to those benefits. You don't get parts taken out, especially in the Middle East. You were not getting the government taking money out of your paycheck every month to go into a retirement plan. So yeah, vital to make sure that you include that in your thoughts when you're going overseas.
Yeah, I think in some ways there's almost an opportunity here to sort of do a little bit of a reset and a bit of an MOT on your finances and what lies ahead for you. I mean, whether it's a destination where you're going to be benefiting from a company pension scheme, or as in the case of the UAE, where it's in all likelihood not a place where you can benefit from a company pension scheme, it's an opportunity to address it and think, well, what have I got or what have I not got in this country? And if I haven't got something, what do I need to be doing to supplement it? And then what did I leave behind in the UK? What's going to be happening with that? Do I need to think about how that's going to be looked after for the years that I'm going to be abroad? As I say, I think every time you do go somewhere, you sort of embrace what your situation is in terms of financial package, how that's going to set you up for your future, and do a little bit of a reset of your finances to take everything into account.
Yeah, I think that when you do relocate, the first thing you should do is seek professional financial advice. Now, that's not necessarily jumping into something and meeting an advisor and signing up to a long-term savings plan as people did years ago. I'm just talking about what you've just said there, Simon, is actually having a bit of a holistic overview of everything you've got, just to make sure your ducks are in a row and that everything's ticked off, so that you know moving forward, whether you're in that country for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, or the rest of your life, that you've got your foundation set straight away. I think that would be a really good piece of advice for new expats or people that are thinking about moving overseas.
And also 3 months in, if the first 3 months, okay, it's all a rush and it's amazing and that's great. But after 3 months, perhaps start to have that strategy. Start to think, okay, well, this is what I kind of want to have in a few years, or this is sort of what I'd like to be sort of in 10 years time be at, both in terms of career wise and, assets wise as well. Yeah. Even if you don't jump on it straight away, start to build some kind of strategy into your lifestyle.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I think one of the questions I've written down here was what is what was it like sort of dealing with your finances in lots of different countries? And one of the biggest eye openers for me coming here was I couldn't set a bank account up until I had a social security number. So that obviously took a couple of months to get with my visa process and things. And I couldn't have a bank account. I didn't even think about these sorts of things. And it's not something that was highlighted to me or anybody told me about. And I see the question on Facebook pages all the time. Can you set up a bank account without, can you do this? Can you do that? That is something, the information you can certainly get from speaking to a professional before you maybe make the move. If you're thinking about doing something, thinking about becoming an expat, maybe just ask the question from a professional or someone that's gone through it before that can kind of point you in the direction.
Also, rules and regulations, sending money to and fro. Like I can tell you, I can tell you in China, for example, it's a controlled currency. So you can only send so much home per year, and you have to go through sort of this. You have to do this whole system to get money in and out of the country. I know most of the time costs quite a bit. Most of the time, that's not the case. But do be aware of the country you're moving to. Do be aware of their kind of currency laws, and be aware of their currency fluctuations. Because if you're financing an asset like a house back in the UK, for example, but your currency is pegged to the dollar or something else, some weeks, some months you'll be paid more, some months you'll be paid less, relatively speaking. Yeah,
the currency fluctuation as an expat is huge, especially if you're looking at the pound right now at 1.31, 1.32. That can drop and it can affect your earnings. If you're earning money in pounds and getting paid it in the country you're living in, from 1 week or 1 month to the next, you could be out of pocket. So certainly a consideration.
Yeah, I think the idea that I'd like to introduce in this context of what one does or what one learns from being an expat and things to think of when you first arrive overseas. One of the things that I took on board, particularly having a young family with me, was, if we take a step back, often when we come away from the UK, we're going to somewhere sunnier and brighter. It's almost inevitable.
Everywhere's sunnier and brighter than the UK, right?
Well, I was going to say that.
It's a pretty safe bet. Unless you're going to Moscow.
I love the UK. I'm not saying bad things about the UK people. I'm just saying.
Yeah. So by and large, we're going to a sunnier place. And as Chris sort of said earlier, it's great. It's fantastic. Let's have a fantastic time in this place. And obviously people should do that. But what people can lose sight of, that no matter how sunny and lovely the place is, equally, something could suddenly go wrong. And you're a stranger in a strange land, particularly with a family around you. They're even more exposed perhaps than you are if you're the breadwinner. It's so important to understand what to do if something goes wrong. If you have an accident, what's it going to cost you in terms of medical costs? God forbid a family member passes away. What's it going to cost to get to deal with a dead body to take back home? I mean, these are very morbid thoughts, I know. I don't wish to lower the tone, but it is so important, particularly when you're away from your family, away from your support network, which you'd have in the UK. What is going to happen into emergency? What do I need to have in place in order to deal with situations? I mean, for example, in the UAE, where we were based, one of the things I used to work on quite a lot was the fact that, it's a Sharia law country. And so, treatment of people's assets, for example, could well be treated according to Sharia law. And a lot of people don't know what that actually means.
Yeah.
So it's important to get versed and understand the ramifications of an accident in a country that has different laws to what we're used to in the UK.
Almost like having an escape plan, if you like, for want of a better word. Not necessarily an escape, but if it all hits the fan, do you have a go bag? Do you have a plan that you can then, you've got money for a flight, you can get out of the country you're in, you can get home to your family, you can get back to your safe space or whatever, because not every country is maybe as lenient as the UK. Certainly the Middle East had certain rules and regulations that you had to abide by. The US, I don't think is just as harsh maybe as that, but certainly if it was all to fall down or something was to go drastically wrong, do you have a plan B almost?
Yeah. I mean, even
it's
simple
amazing.
things, for example, a lot of people have life insurance that they set up in the UK. just check if it covers you while you're in the US or any other country in the world. Just simple things like just get your ducks in a row to deal with an emergency situation. Yeah.
Most policies will cover people overseas. So if you do have an insurance policy set up in the UK, most of them will allow you to live outside the country as long as you're carrying on paying the premiums. So don't stick your head in the sand and just think, oh, no, everything's fine. Ask the question, because nothing worse than ringing your insurance company up to try and make a claim, or your family member ringing your insurance company up to try and make a claim, and the insurance company saying, oh, no, sorry, we're not going to cover you, especially when you've been relying on it. So you just ask the question for sure.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So what would you, how would you plan for, or how would you advise, or how would you tell clients to sort of plan for their retirement as an expat? Depending on where it's going to be, it may not be in countries that we've lived in, but any country overseas, what would you say is the most important thing for a client to be thinking about when starting to set up a retirement goal, shall we say?
I'd say obviously cost of living in the country you want to retire to. Actually, funny, last week we just discussed, didn't we, what country would we like to retire to?
Yes.
Craig said Africa. Simon, I think, said sort of Southeast Asia, that kind of thing. So obviously within that comes the cost of living, and maybe in a positive way, because you might need less money to have the same standard of living as you would have in sort of more, America or Europe or what have you. So definitely ask them to consider that. I would then preface that with, don't assume the cost of living won't go up in the next 10, 20 years, especially as industry starts to come into different countries. So I'd sort of get them excited about the lower cost of living, then tell them to stop being excited about it, because you don't know how that might factor in as well.
And certainly if you are looking at retiring here in the US, the cost of living or the inflation may start to increase slightly. If you're listening to the Fed chairman right now, he has certainly implied sooner, maybe not tomorrow or in the next year or so, but at some point in the future, in the next couple of years, you're going to see a hike up in inflation, which will increase the cost of living. So if you are close to retirement age, make sure you're factoring that into your numbers right now and obviously for the future.
And as we've already been suggesting, do your homework, not just on the cost of living, but what is the tax picture? Now, obviously, that's notwithstanding that the tax picture might change between now and your retirement to that place. But in the meantime, learn what you can in terms of what the real cost is going to be. I mean, is there any particular treatment for non-national residents of that country? Just get as much information as you can so you don't get any nasty surprises when you do reach that dream country for your retirement.
I think that's a really good point to cover, is education. Just to educate yourself on the country you're going to. Make sure to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ring someone like ourselves up, or depending on what area you need information on, a professional in that sector. Ring them up and ask the question. Don't be afraid. That's the whole point of what we do. We're here to help you and guide you. We're here to answer all of your questions. We're not here to sell you things. We're not here to push you into products. We are literally here to help you. We're here as a resource for anyone to understand expat financial planning and just financial planning in general.
And that includes,
well, it might be worth considering your inheritance tax position as well. So if you have assets in the UK, but you decide to go live in another country, don't worry, the government will find them. Don't worry, you will fall under your estate. Don't just assume, that's something I don't have to worry about. That's a huge one, actually, I think, for people that maybe have assets in the UK, but are living overseas, want to leave them to sort of one member of the family. Is it written into the right will? Is that will relevant for the jurisdiction they're in? There's so much that goes into inheritance tax planning. As an expat, and I don't think by and large there's a lot of information out there about it. I think a lot of people, for lack of a better word, can be naive about the position they find themselves in. It's a huge one. If we do any takeaway from this, is to really understand what your assets mean from an IHT position, especially when you're overseas.
I'm sure you saw it.
Bit of a rant,
just in the last week, it's been in the news in the UK that there's going to be potentially some changes to the inheritance tax picture. Somehow the UK has to pay the bill for all this COVID expenditure, and inheritance tax is one area that they've earmarked. So you're absolutely right, Chris, and it actually could become even more profound as an issue for people to prepare for.
Interesting what you just brought up there, Simon. There will probably be changes to capital gains tax in the UK as well. In some respects to pay for COVID, in some respects just because capital gains has been fairly low in the UK in comparison to income tax. So eventually they're going to look at that. If you're living overseas, you hold assets overseas, there could be a tax event you'd like to trigger before you go back to the UK. This certainly does not constitute advice, but it's being aware that if you hold securities or what have you, and you were to dispose of them and you've been outside the UK for long enough, you can mitigate capital gains tax as well. That's just one very small example I've just plucked out of the air of using knowledge the right way, effectively, to save yourself money as well. Be aware.
100%. And I think what we'll try and do maybe is get a CPA or a tax professional on to answer some questions. I think that would be really useful for the listeners. So we'll try and arrange that. So is there anything else that you guys would add that you think is key that we may not have covered for expats living abroad, worried about their finances or worried about maybe what they can and can't do?
Get advice. If you're worried, then talk to someone about it. Don't try and get out of that hole by yourself necessarily. Just get someone whose job it is to take a look at your situation and maybe begin to identify some of the ways you might be able to improve your financial situation.
Yeah,
hugely. Be informed. Don't, a good wealth manager will always seek to inform you first. And if you go to sort of the right kind of firm, they'll make sure that they tell you all these sort of things you need to know, or at very least plant the seeds of ideas that you might need to look at into the future as well.
Yeah.
Don't just muddily, blindly float around the world like many do, being ignorant of taxes, being ignorant of legislation, and then being caught out later on.
Yeah, no, completely agree. I think education is the key, and asking the questions and being informed. You're right. We are here to show you every single option that's available to you, and then it's your decision which option you take. All our job is to say, hey, this is what you can do, A, B, C, or D, whatever it might be, and then whatever works best for you and whatever you want to do, our job to kind of help you do it. But certainly get a good understanding of the country you're going to, what limitations might be in place, and what you can and can't do there. Fantastic. On the other
hand, we were just talking about people who might find that they're struggling with their finances while being an expat. The flip side is that for hopefully the majority of people whose finances are doing really well while being an expat, which is already one of the reasons that people became an expat, to improve their employment and their job situation and their earnings power, is take advantage of it. It's a fantastic opportunity. Obviously, enjoy to the max you're living abroad and having a different lifestyle from back home. But take full advantage of it. Don't be complacent with that opportunity, because you don't know what the next move is going to be, and whether it's going to be a tougher earnings environment, whether you're going to have less disposable income that you could take advantage of. So maximize what you can in terms of planning for your future financial picture.
100%. And I think on that note, we'll draw a line under this. If anybody out there does need any help, has any questions about expat living, expat finances, or even about finances, it doesn't have to be expat. You don't have to be an expat. We are here to help. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, podcasts, all of the platforms. We are available. If you Google us, it'll come up. I hope you found this really interesting and beneficial. We're doing this hopefully to help all of you guys out there, and thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Pleasure, guys. Enjoyed it.
Take care.